I wanted to come here today and I want to talk about negativity because I feel like it's a relatively important conversation that I feel like isn't being had a lot or really at all. You know, from the lens of art, just starting off with art because that's, yeah, you know, it's in front of me. It's what we do here, kind of, for the longest time, I would not make anything if I felt that it had a negative tone to it, right? So I wouldn't make anything condemning an idea or condemning quite literally anything, like not at all, not one bit. And thinking, looking at this now as I'm coming into a different stage and kind of seeing things differently, I think that's strange that I had that take. I wouldn't make anything dark, anything sad, because I don't know why exactly. Actually, to this moment, I can't really tell you why I did things this way. I just felt like it was a bad thing to put out in the world, I was like, I'll only do things with any sort of that are positive in the end. And I still agree with the overall idea of that, of if you can choose between doing something negative and doing something that has a positive impact, you should of course choose the positive one. I don't think many people would disagree with that. I think that's like how most of us look at things, or at least I'd hope so, because I think that's a nice way to go. But to avoid all negativity is really weird, especially if you're trying to have a serious conversation, I think that a lot of the time it's a good idea to not be negative in the most childish sense. I would never put anything out there where I'm shitting on something, where I'm just being negative on something, trashing on it for no reason. I think in that vein, avoiding negativity is a good idea. But in the vein here on Paint&Talk, for an example, where we try and have discussions and conversations about things, I think there is an element where negativity is necessary. Because sometimes, the answer is not the one that sounds the nicest. I mean, I feel like I sound like an edgy Redditor right now, but it's completely true that, sometimes, you have a question that you need to answer, and by avoiding all sort of negative answers, you can't really get there, and sometimes things are just bad that you want to have a discussion about. Things are negative, and I think that's okay. I don't know why we're sort of in this zone right now, I think, and I feel like we're coming out of it a little bit, but on the internet at least, I'm still seeing it a lot, where negativity is seen as the primary enemy. Put positivity out there, focus on positive thoughts only, and I especially do see in that zone of thoughts, of have positive thoughts, think nice things. And on the one hand, that's nice, and I think all of us, or I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, I guess, but I know I prefer having positive thoughts over negative ones. I can say that for sure. But I feel like everyone's so discouraged to be negative. And that's kind of what I want to come here and talk about, is the validity of negative emotions, Because a lot of the times they're the most real ones. I think this can go back to a discussion that I was having, oh man, this was a couple episodes ago, I think, or good episodes back now, on is there a good and evil? And a lot of the things people say is that you are not your actions, as a way to be the bad things you do are not related to you, right? And I said that no, it's almost, in my mind, anti-human to say that. You need to take the good and the bad. And I feel like going down that line of thought, right, I believe it's anti-human to ignore the negative parts of ourselves. I think it's just a plain bad idea to ignore the negative aspects of a conversation. Or, you know, I think a lot of the times the conversations that need to happen most are conversations where one or both parties walk away, usually both, I think, usually, yeah, walk away not feeling the best after the conversation. And oftentimes, you know, I think we all try and avoid those because it's natural to, but oftentimes I feel like those are the conversations that need to occur the most, you know, are conversations where people, it's not a nice answer, because those are the hard conversations that need to happen. And I think maybe, especially, I mean, it's no secret, obviously, I'm Gen Z, right? And I think especially the way that this generation was raised, we were kind of coming up in that time of like, and I feel like I sound like the worst person on earth saying this right now, but we were kind of raised in that time of, you know, participation trophies, and like the attitude of, well, as like the worst boomer you know calls it, everyone gets a hug kind of thing, right? We were definitely raised in that, for sure. And I think that that's kind of given us, first of all, I want to say I think that's a good thing. I do. I don't think we should be teaching kids right out the gate the harshness of reality. Like, what do you gain as an adult from going like, you know, that kid sucks at field day in elementary school. He should have been so much better at dodgeball, and he needs to deal with the harsh reality that he's not a winner, and little Timmy's a winner because he threw that ball at that other kid harder. Like, I don't think this is a real conversation. I don't care. You know, maybe participation trophies are dumb and like bad. I don't know if there's like a study on this or something. I generally think the whole thing's a silly conversation. My point though is, like, in concept, I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. What I do think is a bad thing though is kind of the natural end that gets brought to a lot of the time, of like, negativity is a bad thing in all forms. And it should be avoided. You should focus on happy thoughts. You should say happy things. You should try and be happy as much as you can. And on the one end, I feel like that's a relatively nice thing, right? Because we all want to feel happy. We all want to focus on the good. We all want to be good. You know, all this stuff. We all want that. So I think on the one hand, like, I'm inclined to be like, no, that's a great thing to be like, let's focus on the positive, right? And I think it is a great thing 99% of the time, but there's definitely a negative edge to that, right? Of, negative, no, but there's definitely a bad edge to that of sometimes we need to focus on the bad parts of something. We need to have a serious discussion. And I'm not saying, I feel like combining this with the whole, like, we're in that generation of participation trophies was a bad idea. I'm not saying as kids, we need to be raised having this discussion. I'm saying that, like, by the time we're at a certain age, this should stop, right? And even having this conversation, I feel like bad about, because the reality is, I mean, as much as I think there's a point of like we aren't having real conversations, I also would agree with the fact that like there's a whole lot of negativity out there in the world right now. Like, there just is, right? And I feel like me being like, we need to allow more of that is bad. So I don't want to misconstrue my words. When I say negativity here, I don't mean it in the sense of like we need to be more mean to each other. I don't think that at all. That's not what I mean here. What I mean more so is like, even me, let's talk about that last line I just said, right? Even me being like, I don't want to have this conversation because there's already too much negativity. It's like, we're scared. I mean, I'm just did it. I myself am scared to have a real conversation about like, how much should we allow those negative emotions in because of how much negativity there is. You know what I mean? And even I'm scared to have a real conversation. I remember when I was I've made probably 3 or 4 videos on my other channel where I had a whole video planned out, and I even recorded it, and I was like, there's kind of a negative tone to this. I only want to focus on the good. And I agree with myself. I do want to focus on the good. But is that real? You know what I mean? Like, how much honesty do you want to sacrifice in the pursuit of having a nice thing to say? You know, and then I feel like even elements of this are so much harder of a conversation because people will hear something like this, and I definitely did when I was younger and I started to really think through this stuff. They'll use it as an excuse to be an asshole. You know what I mean? It's very easy to go, no, I'm being honest, when you're just being a dick. And then it's like, well, that's also not good. But also, completely being too nice, you just end up as a people pleaser. You end up as a yes man. That's not good either. Everyone wants that happy medium, right? And how do you find that without... It's tough to find that, you know what I mean? Because I would argue it's situational. And I feel like that's almost a conversation that I personally have been having with myself kind of like my whole life, you know? When I was, I want to say 14, I was super edgy, and I was like, I'm going to be the honest guy, right? I'm going to be the guy that's so honest to a fault because I'd rather be that than the guy who is a pushover or a people pleaser of any kind. Like, I'm going to be the honest guy, right? And for a year or so, I did that until I had to kind of take a look at, like, okay, how honest am I being versus just using honesty as a cloak to excuse my own, like, shitty behavior. You know what I mean? And then for a while, because I had that realization, which is something that, like, I think is overall a good thing, you know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of us could, or not could, but when we're in our early teens, need to have realizations like that, because that's how you become a fully formed, fully developed person. You know what I mean? And, you know, I think what's so great in my life personally is that, like, I still do have a good amount of friends from when I was a teenager who, like, I can sit with and be like, wow, look at how much all of us have developed, you know? And that was done through getting through the negativity. But for a while, what I did is when I first was like, wow, I'm just using my brutal honesty as an excuse to be an asshole to people. When I first came to that realization, what I did was I sort of overcorrected, right? And for a while, I was like, I'm going to be the nicest guy I know. I'm never going to say anything poorly about people. I'm going to make sure that, you know, if there's a conversation where they're talking bad about, you know, Josh or Jason or, you know, like just random names, you're like, if they're talking bad about that guy, I'm going to stay out of it. I'm going to be the guy that says something nice about Jason. I'm going to be the guy that says something nice about Josh, you know? And looking now, I mean, it's definitely, I will say, if you're somebody who doesn't want to have the tougher sort of conversation with yourself, the conversation that, to an extent, I really feel like I'm still having now, and you just want to be either the nice guy or the mean guy, it's much nicer, it's much easier to be the nice guy. You get into a lot less trouble when you're 100% nice all the time. But the problem is, when you're too nice, I feel like, and this could be a regional thing, you know, because now I'm discussing this off the lens of the internet, and we're talking about the real world. So this definitely could be a regional thing. But I know, for me, where I am in the world, in New York, a lot of people started not trusting me because I was too nice, I was too honest. And they were like, it almost was like nobody trusted me because if you're not saying anything bad, do you even have anything to say? Do you like them more than us? Why are you not speaking the you know, the honest truth of the situation right now? And that was just as much of a, you know, it put me in a position where I was just close enough with everyone, or I was just friendly enough to be friends with everyone, but not close enough to anyone to really have a bond with anyone, you know? And that's when I was like, man, also being too nice doesn't work great either. You know, I can't do this either because people don't trust me. They don't trust me. They think there's something going on, or they think that I don't like them, or they just feel like they can't trust me. They think I'm too nice. They think something's up, right? And then I was like, the other side of this too is like, sometimes you can't always be nice. You know what I mean? Like, how nice can you be till you're a pushover was the big thing. And a lot of this too is coming out of like, you know, sort of having this discourse with myself and thinking through this as I was in a high school scene, right? So like, when you're there, a lot of the stuff you're dealing with that's like, oh, I'm a pushover right now, is like, you'll get tangled up in drama. People will use you as an excuse, and like, that's what I mean more so. I think there is a chance that now, as like an adult in the real world, I could totally rehab this dialogue with myself, and the answer might just be to be a nice guy all the time, you know? But certainly back then, the problem with that was I was too nice, and I overcorrected. I was a pushover. And then it's like, how do you... Now it's almost like I had to start treating things situationally, right? In terms of like, how do I want to know when I should be negative because that's the real thing going on, and how should I know when I'm not being negative because I want to stay positive right now, or I want to, like, I just don't want to do that, or I don't want to put that out there, right? And sometimes it's a really easy conversation to have. It is kind of the good news. I know that as far as like this YouTube stuff goes, which is obviously the internet, it's not the real world, I still won't put out a video. I will not spend 2 weeks on a video that has a negative conclusion. If you come away from something I make, and I'm talking about this in like longer form content. This is like, you know, me just rambling. I don't mind not spreading negativity. I don't mind having negative tones to what goes on here because I'm more focused on having a real conversation than I am giving everyone, you know, it wouldn't be a real conversation if it was me going like, oh, but that's veering off in negative territory. I don't want to spread that, right? I don't want to do that. I don't think that's a good idea either. Because again, it's a situational thing. And it's easy for me to like look at this and go, okay, the situation of when I'm doing a long form 30-minute video that will take me 2 weeks to make, I don't want to be negative in that because I don't want to, one, invest 2 weeks of my own life into something negative, and I, two, don't want to, you know, like someone sits there and watches 30 minutes, and I, usually in a longer video, I'll genuinely put out a point. I will genuinely say what I believe and like try and, like, here I'm more just rambling, I'm yapping. Over there, I'm more so pitching, right? I'm trying to convince. So why would I, you know, do that and try and convince people of something that's going to make their day worse, or make tomorrow worse, or make them see something as worse than it was before, you know? If people listen to me rambling and I say something negative and they tend to agree with it, I think that's very different than directly going out and trying to convince people of something negative, you know? But then it comes to the real world, and it's like, how do you decide what to do? How do you decide what the moral thing is? If your friend is doing something you don't think is right, should you prioritize that? Should you try and have a real conversation with them? What if they don't want to listen, you know? As you get so much deeper into these things, you realize that like having a conversation is more important than feeling nice a lot of the time. Because you need answers sometimes, you know? And that's like all kind of tying back to what I was saying last week. Maybe it was last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago. In terms of like, it's to deny yourself your own humanity in a lot of ways, to go and say that you won't put out any sort of negative, or you won't do anything bad, that you won't put out any negative actions, to try and separate yourself from the worst parts of yourself is, as I said, and I stand by this, I agree with this, is kind of to deny yourself your humanity, right? I think that because we all have good and bad parts of ourselves. And I think that it's the same thing of like, I think almost in a lot of ways what I'm trying to get at here is that like, it's the same thing as the difference between having an adult conversation and someone who I'll consider is like, oh, you haven't really thought this through yet, you know, you don't, like, I don't know. And maybe that's kind of pretentious of me, is it? I don't know, you know? Because I'm trying to think about this more in terms of how to handle yourself. When should you be negative? When should you be positive? I remember this year at New Year's, I was sitting around with all my friends and we went over New Year's resolutions, and in all of 2024, I didn't talk any shit. Like, that was one of my big things, is like, when I'm with people, no matter what, I will not speak poorly of anyone else. And then, which by the way, total flop of a resolution, but I still tried to do that. I still made an attempt, right? And what I said to my friends this year was like, okay, I think that was too much. I don't think that was a good idea either. I think that was just as bad of an idea as it is to be negative all the time, right? So I said, like, my New Year's resolution in 2025 is to try and find the balance of when should I be negative, when should I choose, you know, when should I, because I think all of us want to focus on the positive, or at least I know I do. So I want to focus on the positive, but how will I know when to be negative enough that, like, I'm still not, you know, being a pushover. I'm still not, I can still be sort of a real person. You know what I mean? Or I don't think real person is the right term. Maybe like a full person. Because someone who's positive all the time or is only good is like a half person. There's this one really annoying Joey Diaz clip where he's like, you gotta do something. You gotta, you know, if you don't drink, you gotta do cigarettes, or if you don't do cigarettes, you gotta do a harder drug. Like, he's talking about like people who don't do anything are too boring. And I don't agree with that in the lens of drugs. I mean, like, I'm sober, obviously, so I clearly don't. But I do agree with that in the sense of like, kind of what sides of yourself you choose to display. You know, if you have a friend who you hang out with and they are literally only saying good things about other people all the time, or good things about things. You know, like, let's say you want to get into politics with your friend and you want to both complain about something going on that you both find to be annoying. And they go, I agree that this is bad, but I'm only going to focus on the positive aspects of it. Eventually you're going like, we're not having real conversations, and you only seem like half of a person because you're only giving me half of the story. You won't show me that side of you. So that, I think, is what I'm really trying to find out as I navigate this year, is like, how do you be a positive person while still being still being a whole, complete person, you know? And I think maybe the answer I'm looking for here, that is, you know, one of my problems, I think a lot of the times, that I always look for full answers to things. I always want to be like, have some sort of rule. I always want to find something that makes it easier to understand. I think in a way that's something we all do as people, because we want to be able to just like go like, oh, I have this figured out, rather than saying the truth that like, maybe it's a case by case scenario is the answer I need. I don't know 100% though. And I really will say I've not gotten any closer after all this painting and talking with you all. But let me know your thoughts on this. I think this was kind of, you know, I feel like it's annoying when I do this at the end, but I'm going to do it anyways because I kind of like doing it for myself. Give like a little like how I think that went. I think like I kind of went in circles there a little bit. So I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Anyways, this painting is done. I was experimenting with, I have like mineral oils over here that I was dipping the brush in to try and experiment with like thinning out the paint. I think it's just paint thinner is what that is actually called. But I want to experiment a little bit with like thinning out the paint, thickening the paint, and like layering a little bit. And honestly, it didn't make for a bad thing. You know, at one point I tried to put a face on him, and that definitely didn't work because I think partially because I don't have a fine enough brush and it's too small of a canvas. But maybe if I made a bigger face, it could work. Either way, though, I think this is nice. I think the colors are nice. I think it works. And it was cool to try a new technique. I can use that in the future as I develop here. But anyways, you guys know the drill. This is the painting. Go check it out on Instagram. Don't forget to comment your thoughts on negativity and the role that it plays in all of us and what we put out there and what we take in, you know? And until tomorrow, guys, gals, and pals, this has been Paint and Talk episode 35. I am here every day at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, painting and talking with you all. Was that good, adding in the time? Like the Eastern Standard Time, like, was that good to, like, oh, I'm here every day at 9 a.m.? Like, was that...